All right. Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Paul Grand, CEO here at MedTech Innovator. Welcome to another episode of our MedTech Innovator live webinar series. This is something that we do every single week, same time, 10:30 a.m. on Thursdays Pacific time as part of the MedTech Innovator Accelerator program. And if you haven't been here before, MedTech Innovator is an accelerator for medical devices, diagnostics, and digital health technologies. We work with some of the leading startups all over the world and leading scale-ups all over the world, as well as the leading strategics and other stakeholders in our industry. Basically, anyone who is aligned with the same mission of bringing technology to patients. We basically are on a mission to make sure that innovation does not fail, critical innovations, that they actually make it to patients and with the appropriate value. And as part of that program, we have a webinar series where we bring together experts on different topics who can share their advice, their guidance, their insights, so that our entrepreneurs don't make mistakes. That's what this is really all about. It's not just about, giving you a lecture. This is not that kind of a format. We're going to talk about things that our startups are interested in. So the questions that I will be posing today, for the most part, are ones that were submitted in advance by our companies. So that's the discussion we're going to have here today. If you're on the YouTube live stream, please put your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube live stream. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll try to ask our panelists those questions. And for all the MedTech Innovator companies, you know the drill. Just put your questions into the Q&A, and I will get to those in the last 30 minutes after the live broadcast. All right, so today we're going to have a really interesting discussion. One of my favorite topics is really all about the team. So we're talking about things like recruiting, human resources, building your board. These are fundamental to a company and often overlooked. I admit personally, in the past, when I was getting started as a founder, I was a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I started a lot of different companies. And I used to have my own personal rule, which is when it was time to hire an HR firm or have an HR person, I was ready to move on, because at that point, things were getting complicated enough that, I was probably ready to go off and do something else. But I've grown up a lot since then and realized how fundamental HR and recruiting and all these functions are to a company, and that it's not good enough to just kind of start things and run. So we're going to have a discussion today with three expert panelists on these topics. I'm going to introduce them to you now. First up, we have Alan Cullen, who is the president at Westwood in Wilshire. Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm and your background and your role at your firm.
Hey everyone, Alan Cullen, CEO at Westwood in Wilshire. I've been in an executive search in the life sciences sector for almost a quarter century now. Founded Westwood in Wilshire in 2003. And for the last decade, we have primarily focused most of our efforts on working with smaller, innovative growth companies at the forefront of science, medicine, and technology. So if you're on this podcast or broadcast, I guess, at the moment, that's squarely in the world in which we've been immersed and generally tend to operate. This is our second year in sponsorship with MedTech Innovator, which has been an absolutely fantastic experience, and love the fact that it's just 10 minutes west of me in Westwood here. So, Paul, thanks for having me today, and look forward to the discussion.
Excellent, Alan. Thanks for being one of our partners. Thanks for being part of this. We've really enjoyed, spending time with you. Companies get a ton out of working with Westwood and Wilshire. So thanks for being part of this. Looking forward to the discussion. Next up now from TriNet. So we got Jim Christino first, national practice leader in medical devices. So Jim, tell us about TriNet yourself.
Yes, and thanks for the intro. Excited to be here, everybody. Jim Christino, coming from the East Coast. I'm out in Boston. My role at TriNet is I lead the national team of medical device specific sales consultants. TriNet, if you know or do not know, we're a industry leader on human capital management outsourcing, HR outsourcing, medical benefit outsourcing. as part of our PEO model. So me and my team of 8, Kate being one of them, we focus specifically on brand new startup med device companies or ones who are already scaled to the appropriate level. And we help them stay compliant at all times by offering one of 5 different services that we can get into in a few minutes. But super happy to be here, excited to be in front of you guys, and looking forward to all the questions that you have.
Great. Thanks very much, Jim. Looking forward to the discussion as well with you. TriNet is a terrific firm that, we've worked with in the past, and excited to have you here. Kate Kozak, life science consultant, also with TriNet. Please tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Kate Kozak. I am a self-proclaimed coffee addict, dog lover, and life sciences practice leader here at TriNet, focused primarily in the California space. So for the last 3 years, I've partnered exclusively with life science firms, including medtech, biotech, diagnostics, digital health, and medical device companies. For those of you that don't know or weren't familiar with what Jim was sharing, TriNet is a strategic partner to these types of companies, helping to simplify HR administration with payroll services, premium level benefits, risk mitigation, and compliance expertise, all delivered through industry tailored services. I'm happy to be here as part of this panel and looking forward to a great conversation.
Terrific. Thank you very much, all of you. This is going to be a lot of fun. All right, so let's start off and talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals. I kind of gave that little setup earlier that, I used to, literally run for the hills as soon as it was time to get complex enough to have things like HR in a company. But, this is not something we can do, right? So, Alan, I want to start off with you and talk a little bit about, just kind of when the right time is to start thinking about recruiting and talent acquisition, if you will. Is that something you just kind of do when, it's a year or whenever later and you go, we need to hire some people, let's start thinking about that? Or is it more of kind of a philosophical thing that you can always be doing in some way? Like, are there things that you can do as a founder that are kind of setting yourself up for kind of how your hiring is going to go? So give us some kind of like best practices, thoughts that, you kind of instill on people when you work with them and when you talk with them.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep this one pretty simple, Paul. I don't think it's a complicated question or answer, and the simple response is always be recruiting. It doesn't mean that you always have to be hiring, but always be recruiting. Especially if you're a first-time CEO, this is your first time really being responsible for all things that are happening under the umbrella of your company, developing a compelling narrative that attracts the right type of talent for your company is a skill. And that skill takes a lot of practice. So guess what? Practice. 2, it's going to dramatically, if you're always in recruiting mode, it's going to dramatically increase your database of viable targets. And 3, it's going to save you so much time for when it's actually time to hire. The more people you talk to, the more branding you're doing in the market for talent. And frankly, that lack of branding in the market is the biggest competitive disadvantage that most startups face. So the more conversations that you're having, the more education that you're doing out in the market for talent, the more branding you're doing along the way, and the more that you're whittling away at that competitive disadvantage and leveling the playing field. And lastly, I think it's important to keep doing that because it'll give you a better sense for what the market for talent looks like, and you'll have a better sense of what the ideal profile is that you're targeting. So often, especially in startups, these are not cookie cutter positions that you're going to be recruiting for. Oftentimes, it's the first time that you've done it, and so as job descriptions turn into resumes, and resumes turn into human beings, the profile or the target is probably going to be fairly fluid. So the more that you've done it, the more that you've talked to people, the more profiles that you've seen, the more valuable information that you're going to have, and more clear you're going to be on the target that you're after when it comes time to actually pull the trigger to hire somebody.
Good advice. And, you mentioned something, you said, in those early days, in job descriptions, and I'm thinking about it that in the early days, a lot of times there are no job descriptions. And,
Sure.
it's just, right. It's just a founding engineer or a clinician or or a scientist or somebody who is just kind of, has this idea and is like, hey, you want to come do this thing with me? Maybe just what are some of the best practices at that stage that can set somebody up for success? Do you get involved with people ever kind of coaching them that early on in their process when it really is kind of like just those early founders?
Yeah. Are you looking for a sort of the formalization of the process, or looking for me just simply to speak rather than at that next advanced level of job description, but more at the simply when you're even formulating who it is that you're even looking for in general?
Well, there's a bunch of this we could unpack in a lot of different ways, right? So there's things like compensation, all that, and equity and plans and dividing that up. I don't want to get into that level of detail yet. I'm just saying more like at that super early stage. Like, would you advise people to, when you're sitting down, to go like, hey, write a job description for yourself, even as kind of like early co-founders? I know that I can just tell you, and I'll let you answer the question. I can tell you that in my experience, it's often the case that in the early days, you get a startup where 2 or 3 people are sitting around and they have this idea, or they kind of they agree they're going to do this thing together, and everyone splits up the equity like a third, and no one really knows who's the CEO, and they kind of just start going, and then it becomes obvious the workload is really differently distributed, and there could be frustration. So I guess I'm just getting at kind of like, are there things kind of even at super early stage, would you say to people, hey, let's write up a job description, let's divide up responsibilities? What are some things that you might advise people if they're starting from scratch?
Yeah, it's absolutely. The more templates, processes, and documentation that you can put in place early on is gonna. I know it's time consuming and it sounds crazy in light of probably all the other fires that as a startup you're likely to be facing. But the more that you can document all of these things, the more time. And you're going to save so much time and headache on the back end of this. And the job, just don't let good enough be the enemy of, or perfect be the enemy of good enough at this stage of the game. You can always adjust. You can always with better information that you gather as you go along, and as you learn more about what it is that's going to resonate with yourself personally, with the team, with the culture of the organization. You can absolutely, adjust on the fly. And look, this is not just, lip service. My firm's about 20 people, so we're not, tremendously larger than probably most of you are at this stage of the game. And I can speak just as a specific example of having documented each step of our own recruitment process for people that we're bringing on board here, has made a enormous difference in terms of the success that we've had, the candidate experience that people have had, understanding better what each person's role is within our organization, being able to talk about it in a compelling, logical fashion with the market for talent that we're looking to attract. It's made a huge difference in the onboarding and mitigating attrition rate, even within our own firm. So the more time, I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but the more time you can spend up front documenting these processes and planning and prepping with the information that you have at the ready, the better off you're going to be.
Perfect. All right. Well, that set up my next question really well. Thank you for that. Which is really, having an infrastructure in place from the beginning. And so, Jim, I'm going to go to you for this. So how important are benefits and having a real solid HR infrastructure in the ability to hire, retain talent at a smaller company? And, and kind of at what point do you want to start having like a real HR function within a company?
Yeah, good question. And first things first, it's going to give you, the decision makers of the business, around 25% more of your time back. So you can focus on whatever the mission it is at hand, right? Owning or being CEO of a small business, depending on the state with compliancy laws, can be challenging for sure, almost unfair. right? With all the laws that you need to put up with, and you guys, aren't really supposed to, or no shame in not knowing every single HR compliancy law that comes out, because I feel like almost every other month there's a new one coming out. So I think that proactively is going to get you guys to be able to focus on driving revenue, hiring the best and brightest people. Another part of your question, you asked about benefits and having HR team and how to get the right people. So as I mentioned before, guys, I'm in the Boston area. So life science in Cambridge, Massachusetts is probably the biggest hub in the United States. And I'll say some of the brightest minds, in my opinion, come out of MIT and Harvard in my backyard here. So I always tell, a CEO or CFO of a small company, say 10, 15 people, why would somebody with a degree from Harvard or MIT go work for you when they can go down the street and work for Pfizer or work for Thermo Fisher, these massive type environments where they have the best of the best benefits? The reason they are going to come work for you is A, their voice is going to be heard, a smaller organization where they have the potential to make a bigger impact. And B, if you hire, someone like a TriNet or have a great benefit package, you are going to get those brightest minds to come work for you, because you're offering them more than just a salary. You're offering them benefits, quality of life. It'll help you bring in the most important people and help you get going in a faster way, for sure. I don't think, because of benefits, that's why they're going to work for you, but it could be the reason why they never leave. And remember that we live in a day where, some people are leaving certain jobs in certain industries over $5,000 in their salary. But if you're offering the best of the best type benefits and have an overall package where it makes them, not even, second guess that, they should be with you. Your retention should be much better for the long term.
No, good, really good point there in terms of being competitive with the larger companies. Alan, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I'll just add also in from a recruitment perspective or qualitative perspective. I mean, clearly, if you can compete on a level playing field from an actual benefits perspective, that's a fantastic thing for sure. What I will also add in is the greatest competitive advantage that a small company has is flexibility. And if I was to offer just one piece of advice of how you're going to compete effectively against the largest companies on the planet, it would be that don't paint yourself into a corner or make definitive choices about that limit the size of the market that you're going for, or what you're willing to do to attract the very best candidates out there. Certainly, if offering a great benefits package is part of that, wonderful. Stay flexible. The big companies are not flexible. They've been doing things a certain way for a very long period of time, and the payoff for people that go to work there is at least a perceived stability. You know what you're gonna get. So play into the advantages that you have, and flexibility is one of them.
No, it's a really good point. The flexibility is one of the things that attracts people to startups versus having this super rigid, long, deep hierarchy of things that somebody has to do and all the red tape and bureaucracy, et cetera. And the idea of a startup often is attractive because you don't have those things. And yet, to Jim's point from before, one of the things that sets you up for success is having these things in place. And so maybe, let's start off with kind of what are some of the basics, Jim and Kate, that a startup should consider when, thinking about HR and just kind of that infrastructure. And also, as part of that, you have a lot of kind of like a menu of things, payroll, you have benefits, you've got all sorts of things, right, that you're going to have to set up for your employees. And the tendency, at least I've seen, is to go out and kind of, maybe somebody and they say, oh, here's the payroll company, or you used to get payroll from someone before, and that's who you sign up with. So how do you kind of advise people to do that in terms of managing multiple vendors, or so if you're talking to a startup, Jim, Kate, and again, I know you come from TriNet, but just kind of, you're advising somebody who maybe if you had a chance to, there's someone maybe who's a problem, kind of a client who's got a real bad infrastructure, and you could rewind the clock and start from day one, what would be your advice to that, that startup at that super early stage? What should they be considering as kind of their early HR infrastructure?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that first, Paul, and then Jim, feel free to jump in if you'd like. And I would say we see the use of multiple vendors all the time with speaking with firms within our industry. Often as they start to grow, they'll add on maybe a talent and recruitment system, they'll add a payroll company, they'll add a benefits administration, and before they know it, they have 9 databases with 9 sign-ons and 9 systems that don't communicate to each other. So when a company is trying to scale, it's the easiest obstacle to accidentally create for themselves, which can impede their ability to grow. Managing many different systems can absolutely become a time suck for these companies, taking their attention away from basically the core philosophy of their business.
Great. I've experienced that, so I can attest to that. And what about in-house versus kind of like outsourcing? So do you hire an HR person who then works with companies like TriNet? Or can everything be outsourced? Should you have an HR person, and maybe kind of at what point do you need to have somebody in-house? And what's the balance between what should be done in-house versus outsourced?
I'll take that one. I would say it's a solid mix of both. We present and we speak to many different companies that have zero HR infrastructure, and many times the CEO is tasked to be the HR manager with no HR background. So we're a major help that way. We can come in and kind of take over on that front. But we also deal with a lot of companies that have an HR or 2, or maybe even 3 on their staff, depending on their size. And those people are the facilitators of the administrators using the TriNet platform, making sure everything's up to date and compliant, depending on the size of the group. Honestly, I feel we work best with either one. It is important to empower your employees. And what I mean by that is if you're a company that has an HR director and you hire an outsourced company like TriNet, remember that the HR director is going to learn and make their job a bit easier by using a system such as TriNet or anybody of our competitors, because they're going to have access to certain things proactively that where they previously were being more reactive and such. It's going to make their job easier. I don't think it will lighten the workload because, HR never stops, but it'll make it easier for them to navigate and just be more efficient.
Yeah, that's good. One other question related to that is, I know it, and one of the functions of HR is to field complaints and to field, someone's got an issue. If it's a super small company with like a flat infrastructure, there's the CEO and everybody else kind of feeling, and it's not easy to go complain to the CEO about the CEO. So is that something that that you do at TriNet? You fill that role as well? Like companies can come to you and talk about their frustrations, or startups? I mean, the employees in the company. Either one of you, Kate or Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just goes back to liability and risk mitigation. As a business owner, as an executive, sometimes you don't want to know what's going on with your employees. It opens you up to litigation, essentially, because you don't want to discriminate that somebody's having marital problems or trouble with money financially. So you want to kind of remove yourself as much as possible from that. So having a partner in place, whether it's TriNet or another HR consultant to help field those questions and complaints, if you will, I think is very, very important to distance yourself. And back to your earlier question, I would say HR is about talent, just as is with any other role. So having the right talent in place is always critical to your business. HR is going to be the backbone for employee development. But when you're small, there might not be a lot of individuals to develop. And that doesn't mean that HR isn't necessarily needed. We spoke earlier about some of the states being very, very employee friendly and litigious, and California is certainly one of them. And I think that's where having the right partner in place can really, really help move your company forward, because it's all those tactical things and fielding questions like that that really take time away from your core function as a business.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. And having, as you said, California is super litigious. Our companies are literally all over the world, not just California. But you want to set yourself up so that you're avoiding problems down the road. And, and I can't tell you how many times I've been involved with companies that are dealing with an issue from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when they hired somebody and they kept things pretty loose, et cetera. And, and now maybe later on they got more formal, but the early people, they weren't so formal. And these are things that, as a startup, you don't really have time to deal with. You're trying to run your company and build your product and run clinical trials or whatever else you're doing. And the last thing you want to do is waste a huge amount of time on something that could have been dealt with if you did it right in the beginning. So thank you for that. I'm going to go on to a little bit of some talking now about recruiting and hiring. So Alan, I'm going to shift over to you for a second. Founders can easily get kind of consumed by recruiting. If they're, I find often in these companies that there is kind of that really early team that might be, a clinician and an engineer or two, or and they don't have that, that business person yet, for example, as one example. What are tips that you have for keeping, those people efficient now on a recruiting process versus having it just kind of be all consuming for them?
Yeah, and I'm unmuted. All right. So I spoke to it a bit, or I began to touch on it, and I'm happy to get into the weeds on any one of these, particular components there. But I can't tell you how critical it is to have a well-documented template that everybody follows consistently when it comes to the recruitment process. And I'll assume for the purposes of this, this conversation here, that you've solved the candidate generation component. Again, I can certainly get into the weeds on another question related to the tactics for that there. But again, it should be, a scenario in which you've got a template that you can always move back to in terms of how candidates are sourced, how they're phone interviewed, online. In our case, we actually employ online testing, the interview, the post-interview breakdown, how you are onboard these candidates, and have it all documented along the way. I understand as startups, you're going to have fires on a daily basis that are going to pull you away from being 100% focused on recruitment, even if it's a high priority. But if you have a template that's available, it helps. Number one, it serves as a guardrail. Two, if you do get off the tracks a little bit, where to put the train back quickly. And I can tell you just from our own experience, the difference that has made in terms of the quality of the people that we've brought in, the candidate experience, which is huge as well. When you have a really good process and you deliver a good candidate experience for people that you're talking to, you don't have to interview as many people, because the ones that you are interviewing that you've already vetted, that you do like, are more likely to be impressed with you, and that's a huge factor as well. So take the time up front to do the things that create a good candidate experience, so that it does remain efficient.
Thank you. In terms of infrastructure, the one that you always hear about is the employee handbook. So when is the right time to set up an employee handbook? Do I do that like I incorporate the company and I do an employee handbook, or is it like okay, after hire 3 or 5? Like what's the right time to do that? Yeah, Kate.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that. Thanks, Paul. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what an employee handbook even is, it basically defines company policies and procedures for handling employment-related questions and disputes. So some employment law experts believe startups and small businesses should have it in place generally when their headcount reaches double digits, so about 10. But I would say as a startup, you should definitely consider it once you're expanding, so Series A and above. So definitely probably 5 employees would be right recommendation.
Thank you. And what about, culture? So it's one of the things that, I think ultimately kind of defines a company, and you can define culture in different ways, but it's one of those things that you kind of, either it's a obvious culture where people actually have written up kind of like, these are our values, these are our components. Other times it's just kind of how the company functions. How important is company culture to a new hire? And also, is there a generational difference when it comes to how people view culture in companies? So Alan, let me start with you on that.
Yeah, so in terms of culture, where do I want to start with that one?
Like, do you advise people on culture? Like, when they're going to recruit somebody in, do you say, hey, what's your company culture? Like, think about that. Is that part of the process?
I mean, there's two reasons why. There's two ways that I would address that one. One, just from an obvious tactical standpoint, you're going to get that question. I don't know by what percentage, but a high percentage of people, and not being prepared to answer that question is just a massive miss. No matter what you're saying, the fact that you simply don't have an answer to that is indicative of where you are in your development process. So don't be that person. Don't be that CEO that doesn't have a good answer to it. But I think that for people that do are prepared to talk about their culture, one, I do think it makes a huge difference, and it's probably indicative of somebody who's really put a lot of time and effort into thoughtfully thinking about the narrative that they want to take out into the market for talent about who they are, what their company is, and what distinguishes it from the market. So you don't even have to talk about culture if you're uncomfortable doing it in hugely qualitative, esoteric types of terminology that you're not comfortable with. It's fine. Talk about it in terms of the things that differentiate your company from the rest of the market. And I think that's all part and parcel with culture as well. But have an answer, develop your narrative, and practice it a lot.
It's great. Jim, let me ask you, at TriNet, you guys yourselves are, hiring. You're a big company, right? And I know, Alan, your company is growing as well. Do you have a company culture that you guys talk about as part of the TriNet description?
Yeah, we have corporate company values that we live by on a national level. So which is great. That comes from our CEO on down, and everyone kind of lives and breathes the mission statement and the value proposition. One cool thing about me being a regional sales leader is I get the opportunity to kind of create my own local culture as well. And a couple words that I like to use when I talk about culture is, when I'm hiring people, I say fit. Are you going to be a good fit? But it all comes back to, it's got to be consistent. So I don't care what your culture is, good, bad, ugly, whatever, it's got to be consistent with every single employee. So it's funny how you ask about culture right after the handbook conversation, because I think they tie in. I'm sure you did that on purpose. But whatever's in the handbook and whatever new employees sign off on, it has to be consistent throughout, just to keep you out of any compliance situations. So, my local culture is based out of respect, transparency. I could go on and on, but I'll tell you, what I do every year, we create a vision statement for the group. Everybody co-authors, what this year is going to be about and how we're going to hold each other accountable. So we do that together to kind of really promote culture, and we stick to it. But as long as it's consistent, I think it all stems from the leader, whether it's a regional sales guy like me or TriNet CEO. It's got to be, led from the front, and like I said, consistent.
Thanks, Jim. And we talk about transparency, and other values, which I value very highly when I think about transparency. In general, when you are thinking about the kind of characteristics, or I should say, when a company is thinking about the characteristics that it wants in its different, potential hires, sometimes, there's this balance between kind of experience, a great paper resume and something someone's done, versus, their character or some of these other qualities. And Alan, let me ask you, just this thing comes up, one of our startups asked this question, which is like, how do you balance between kind of character and, someone you like a lot and might be a good cultural fit, and just experience. And maybe someone's just got, someone looks like a better cultural fit, but the other guy's got more experience, the other woman's got more experience. Where do you advise people to go when you're kind of balancing those two things?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll take it from a purely recruiting perspective and leave it to the two other HR panelists to speak to it from an HR specific angle here. But from a recruiting perspective, I think the market will effectively tell you how well you're balancing those matters there. When we begin, as we work with a lot of the elite innovative companies that are coming from the top, that are the portcos of the top venture capital firms in the world. And these companies, these leaders don't suffer fools, and they're very clear on what it is that they're after. And they offer very definitive components of the ideal candidate that they're looking for from an experiential and an expertise standpoint. And at the beginning of every search, we tell them, great, that's all logical and reasonable. Let's take that out in the market and see what it yields. And so long as you have a robust pool of talent that you're able to generate that check all of those boxes there, I think you can continue to be as narrow and specific as you want about that before evaluating even the fit to the organization. But what we do tell our candidate, and this I think probably speaks a little bit more to the question, which is that what we do tell our clients, the ones that offer up 47 different experiential and expertise things that they want there, is to say, okay, fine, we will go and get that. We'll do our best to deliver all of those things. And here's what I make a promise to you about. For all the import that you place on all of those boxes that you say that you want for this candidate, I promise you there's a 98% likelihood that the person you will choose, it will have nothing to do with any of those things. It'll simply come down to, do I like this person or not? Do I feel like this is going to be a good fit to our organization? So again, I think that from a recruiting perspective, we see it about the ability to generate an appropriate flow of candidates that are being asked. And like I said, I think you can be as specific as you want, but at the end of the day, that's not how people hire emotionally, and that's how you're going to end up hiring as well. You're not going to be different than these other CEOs that we work with. Okay.
So let's then talk. Thank you, Alan, about a little more about the process, in terms of a little more on hiring. I'm just going to ask you one more question, Alan, on this, which is one of these things that comes up is that you're recruiting somebody from somewhere else. Maybe they're leaving a job, and they're talking to you on the side while they're working for somebody else. How do you prevent that person from doing the same thing to you later? Is that just kind of seems like inherently, it's one of those things that you go, well, if they're willing to leave that other company, come work for me, they're probably going to do the same thing later to me down the road. Is that even an issue? Is that just the reality of the world we're in? How do you think about that, Alan?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good question. Sure. I guess I would. I guess my answer would be that it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is why you always need to be recruiting. Should always be recruiting, even on positions that you already have a phenomenal person on board, because you don't know when you're likely to lose somebody to another opportunity out in the marketplace, and always having a nice refrigerator full of people that you've already talked to, that you already have with whom you already have rapport is key. If you're hiring really good people, you can just rest assured that they are getting contacted on a regular basis about other really good opportunities there. So your two risk mitigating factors are one, be prepared for that and be sure that you're continually having conversations as well. And two, I do think if you are a thoughtful leader, I do think that if you put time and effort into documenting your interview and onboarding process, I do think that if you're thoughtful about employing, a world-class PEO like TriNet, I do think that if you're thinking about human resources at that level of things, you're probably doing pretty well compared to the competition out in the marketplace, and that's probably going to be a mitigator of attrition as well.
All right. Well, yes, Kate.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Alan shared a moment ago, I would say it's about asking the right questions and understand why they're leaving and what's driving their desire to exit their current situation. What was it that their employer wasn't doing for them, or how have their goals changed since they might have started with their last employer? It's important to be honest as well about what your organization can provide to them and understand that in this market, to Alan's point, if they're a great candidate, they're likely looking at multiple offers.
And at TriNet, do you guys coach people who are hiring? Do you coach them on kind of the process? Is that one of the things that you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the, I guess, processes that we offer to HR managers is we have something called HR 101, where we collect like-minded individuals within the same industry, within the same geographical area, and give them coaching as to, updates on policies, procedures, and guidance about what's, relevant in the marketplace today. So absolutely, it's something that we help with.
Great.
We also provide salary benchmarking too. So that's a great point, Kate. So we can help hiring managers, get data from the geographical area on the positions that they're hiring for. What a low range, mid range, and high range is for salary for that type of role. That way they're not overpaying, underpaying. They're staying, back to the consistent word. Making sure they're offering, what they should be offering to potential candidates.
And is that something that's just available as a TriNet client? Like, how do people get access to that?
Yeah, so I always say when you hop onto, you're a part of TriNet, you get access to our 18,000 clients, right? And what I mean by that is you get the data that we're able to pull. So you need to be, a client of TriNet, of course, but we're able to provide you specific data. That's why, honestly, one of the biggest advantages of us, solely working with just life science companies, right? You're entering a pool of however many life science clients that we have. You get access to those types of companies and that data behind it. So it's really nice.
Yeah, and let me just dig into that a little bit more then. So, working with TriNet, if I had to choose between, as I said, kind of a menu of payroll and all these other services, from different providers to go with TriNet, does it work out to be the same cost that it would be from having multiple? Is it work out to be less expensive to be with a TriNet than kind of balancing all these different things? I haven't heard the, kind of the whole, story there. And obviously it would probably take us longer than we have to go into that, but just briefly, just give me kind of that. So like, is it like a zero sum game when it comes to choosing between working with TriNet and all those other solutions that I might be hodgepodging together?
I can go briefly. I'll have Kate clarify, but my answer to that is it depends. And that stinks to say, right? I want to give you a specific answer, but it all depends on the group. It all depends on the medical, right? So honestly, and Kate, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's half the time we're an investment. I would say 25% we're a savings and the rest it's cost neutral. It all depends. So that's my short answer.
All right.
Yeah, and at Jim's point, it's about doing your due diligence, right? So it's looking at point in time what you have today and where you want to be in the future. So are you looking to hire an HR generalist? Are you at a point where you feel you need that? Because if so, in California, an HR generalist can cost you $50,000, $60,000, and that's somebody straight out of college with no experience plus benefits. So the great thing about life sciences is I think they're used to the outsourcing model because we have contract manufacturers that we work with, contract research organizations, even fractional CFOs for expertise. So I think that the concept is not incredibly foreign to them. So it's about the offsets that a company like TriNet can provide to them. So things like workers' compensation, EPLI, large group benefits. So when we look at from a holistic perspective, what we're able to provide their companies, oftentimes there is a significant offset, but sometimes there's an investment. So to Jim's point, it's just situational.
Good, thanks. Because, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm thinking about it and saying like, well, if you get things like, benchmarks for salaries and things like that all, are bundled into, the offerings of the TriNet client. Like that's stuff that goes above and beyond what I'm going to get from my payroll company right now.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I would say that's something that comes up frequently in conversations with my clients is what are other companies like me doing, especially as they get into that Series A and Series B and they have the momentum and they're ready to start hiring and growing. They want to get the best of the best. And how do you pull from academia? How do you pull from the Allergans and the Edwards Life Sciences? So having that in your back pocket, like, hey, I know that most companies in my area are funding towards a specific PPO plan. I know that they offer dental and vision. I know that they have a 401 okay in place, but maybe they don't have enough funds to match to it yet, but at least they're offering it to their employee base. So we're able to provide guidance in that matter.
And actually, that's one question I'm going to ask you as well as Alan, which is exactly what you just said. How do you compete? If I'm a startup, I want to compete with Pfizer. I want to compete with J&J or anybody else. I want to hire the top talent. How do I do that? What's the recipe for being able to compete when you probably can't compete on salary? And you probably can't compete on public stock that they can trade. So what are some of the things that a startup can do to compete? Alan, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, again, I think it really comes down to I'll go to the point that I made earlier regarding flexibility. I think that is probably the biggest thing that you have to offer. Look, there are going to be parts of the market that you cannot compete against, and nor probably do you want to compete in that market. If somebody wants to go work for Pfizer or Medtronic or what have you, there is a very high likelihood they're probably not a very good match for your 3 to 5 person company. So good riddance. Great. It's a self-selection process that makes the whole thing more efficient for you. Don't worry about those particular individuals. That said, I mean, as I indicated earlier, to the extent that you can compete or at least play in the same universe from a benefits perspective or infrastructure with these organizations, that's great. But Kate made a great point on the couple questions ago, but asking the right questions of each individual that you're talking to, find out what gets them out of bed in the morning, what their pain points are. For some, it may be title. And if you're a small company, call them chief whatever they want. Who cares? Like, you can adjust it later. Like, if you can compete that way and you can be flexible on that stuff, if they want, I don't know, the key to the executive bathroom, give it to them. Who cares? On that type of stuff, give away the farm on those types of things. Save your money, save your equity if you can. You don't, especially if you can't afford to compete on those other areas, but give in on everything else. I mean, within reason. If you find the person is asking for the executive bathroom key, maybe they're not the right fit for any company, including yours. But anyway, I'll pause there, but that's my answer.
All right, that's good. Let me move on to geography a little bit. We're in a pandemic, and working from home is becoming extremely common now everywhere. If it's not, I would be shocked. Maybe not New Zealand, but pretty much everywhere else. So my question is one of which we're thinking about leadership now. A lot of these companies are small. They're hiring right now, and sometimes for senior leadership. And I imagine that I don't even know it's common, but there's certainly the opportunity that you can hire somebody great who's remote. And they might be senior leadership. They might be the CEO. They might be a COO. They might be a vice president. And my question to you is that something that you're advising companies against and saying like, hey, you know what, this is temporary. You should really hire locals still. Or are you seeing your clients get more comfortable with hiring people who are remote in senior leadership? So Alan, let me start with you on that.
Yeah, I've actually been quite impressed with our clients, both small to even large, that have been pretty flexible around this initiative. Sure, we've got certain clients that are absolutely dead set on every candidate coming in for an on-site interview, relocating within a certain window of time, all of those types of things. But even in those instances, there's usually an extenuating circumstance of why their physical presence is so critical at that particular moment. But for the most part, most of our clients have adapted quickly, and frankly, I think there's probably two reasons for it. One, the likelihood that life is going to return to normal anytime soon is, at least in not just my estimation, but it seems like from our clients' estimation, somewhere out into the future, such that you can't just sit around and do nothing for the next whatever period of time that is. And so I think they'll gladly go back to what we used to do when we're able to do it. But in the meantime, if you're going to compete for the best talent out there, you've got to move forward. And the other point that I'll make, if you're a smaller company, is it's funny. I actually think it's our larger clients that have really cut down on their recruiting. It's our smaller clients that haven't. And I think a lot of that is what is driving that is that, and I'll just, if your technology or therapeutic is going into the clinic, is it a risk for you to spend money to bring in the right type of clinical leadership to oversee that? Sure. Is it a bigger risk not to have that leadership in place as your lead, whether again it's your platform or your therapeutic is going into the clinic? They've evaluated that's a bigger risk, and you've got to continue to move forward. So Zoom interviews, we've onboarded a ton of people who have never physically met the hiring manager or anybody from the team, and it seems to be working out pretty well so far, albeit with a small data pool.
Thank you. No, that's super helpful. And Jim, I wanted to get back to some of the thoughts now on, again, kind of the things that a company needs to have, in terms of its infrastructure. I know there's services that you provide. What about things like, just keeping people more efficient in a distributed environment? Are those some of the things that you're tackling over at TriNet? I mean, besides the typical kind of like, payroll, et cetera. What are the things that, are there any tips you can offer, maybe that you offer in the companies you're working with? You work with lots of clients for keeping people, kind of productive and morale up in a distributed environment.
Yeah, good question. I'll just tell you something that we do, and I think the various teams across the country do as well, is every morning we have kind of a huddle kickoff call. We talk about expectation for the day. Here's what we're going to get accomplished. For a while, we were doing end of the day recap calls, and after a while, I think we graduated from that. So I think having a daily message and having some sense of community while we're all at home in our home offices is critical right now. Also, too, if you guys are managing teams that, over maybe say 5 people, I think a good practice that you guys might want to kind of put in place is bundle up or put little groups together within your teams. So I have a group of 12 that I manage directly, and we have 3 teams of 4. So those teams throughout the day are checking in with each other, bouncing ideas off each other. So it's constant communication and some sense of community throughout the day, rather than doing a big, huge team meeting, 2-3 times a day where not everybody gets to kind of, voice their opinions or have their voices heard. So I think clustering your people is probably a smart idea. I just don't think there's any shortage of, conversation and getting together right now. Even now, 6 months into it, I think it's critical to kind of get in front of each other as much as possible. Every meeting I'm on, I've kind of shifted my mindset. Every meeting I have, whether it's with my team or with a prospect, I'm on camera. I always say that if you're not using your video, there's a reason for it, and I'll let you, fill in the blanks of what that reason is. So I think, honestly, I've been very impressed with the way that, the world's reacted to working from home, right? If this was 20, 30 years ago, who knows what would have happened. So we use Teams, we use Zoom. It honestly is a very, very close second to what it was being in the office. I've hired 2 people myself on my team. And, you miss seeing, human interaction, shaking hands, looking somebody in the eye. I'm practicing looking at the camera lens now, which is kind of awkward, but it looks like I'm looking you directly in the eye. So, I would just say, I know I'm rambling a bit, but it's something I'm passionate about. It's connecting face to face as much as you can. And every time I'm on a call, I say, I appreciate my team and I thank them for what they're doing and they have my trust. So those are just my 4 or 5 things that I do every day.
No, those are great tips. We have a ton of additional questions that were submitted. We're not going to be able to get to them all here on this public broadcast. So a bunch of these we're going to deal with in our last 30 minutes, which we know are just for the companies and MedTech Innovators cohort. But while we're closing here on the public broadcast, I want to wrap up with just a couple questions. One, I want to just kind of get a bench set for, what startups should budget for HR? And I mean like early companies. These are in the early days. What should a company budget for HR, especially if it's being outsourced? I'm talking about, I think Kate, you may have mentioned, hiring somebody right out of school and paying them $50,000 a year or whatever. What's kind of like a budget for HR that a company should set aside? Kate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it all depends on the level of expertise that they're looking for. So as I mentioned earlier, HR generalists are kind of your entry level, the least experienced, but how helpful are they going to be to your company? Because they might know the most about culture building or developing from within. So you want somebody with some experience. And if you look at an HR manager, HR director level, at that point, you're probably around $80,000, $90,000 in the state of California, plus benefits at a minimum, I would say. So I think that's why outsourcing, especially when you're on the smaller side of things, very early stage, is such a great idea because you're not having to take on that cost. And I know controlling cash flow and burn rate is more important than ever. And I think outsourcing is a great way to do so.
Yeah. And in terms of, industry practices and things, are there any like blogs or sites that you recommend, maybe even something with TriNet, that people, who are not working with a TriNet, yet aren't ready yet, perhaps can be reading? Like, do you just advise people something you guys read to stay up on what's kind of happening in HR best practices or something? Any favorites you have? Either Jim or Kate on that?
Yeah, Jim, I'll let you take it.
I read the NAPEO website, napeo.com. I just think there's very timely, very prudent articles on HR, compliance laws that may be potentially coming out in the future. But I mean, of course, I'm going to say TriNet.com, and it's not because I'm trying to sell, but I think our website, there is so much stuff on there that I go to for support. Even when I get emails from clients that I signed up a couple of years ago, I don't have all the answers and I don't pretend to. So I just go on our website and look things up. So I feel like, any really outsourced company will have that type of, white paper, good stuff, good content stuff there. But a third party site that I use is napeo.com.
Thank you. And then I'm going to go to Alan in a second, but Jim and Kate, before we close, I want to make sure you have a chance. Tell us how people can reach you guys and learn more about TriNet. So Kate, you're both muted. There you go. I think you're still muted, Kate.
Go ahead, Kate. I was going to say, let's have Kate take this one. She's the expert in life science, and I'm happy to be here with her. So Kate, take it away.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. And Paul, maybe I can share my information for you later, but I'm local to California. Jim mentioned that he's out of the Boston area. TriNet has a website that you can log on to and look at more of the services that we offer, but you're welcome to reach out to me, direct email, and I'll share that with you, Paul, so you can share it with your cohort as well. Okay,
great. And are you okay if I publish that on our YouTube channel as well? In the comments, put your email address. That's all right. Sure. Okay, absolutely. So we'll do that. And then Alan, I want, in the last minute or two for the public broadcast, a topic we didn't get to were board of directors, and we can't get too much into that. It's a long, it could be its own webinar talking about boards, but just very quickly, is that something that, you get involved with, is helping to recruit boards of directors, also scientific advisory boards?
We do. We love getting involved with with board searches. If I could peel back the onion or the curtain in Oz a little bit there, it's not the most lucrative portion of any firm's practice, at least directly monetarily speaking, but board roles are attractive because it gives you an excuse to reach out to just about anybody in the market that you want to, and the likelihood that they're going to respond and at least have a conversation is quite high. So I guess my advice to the startups here would be, look, it's actually an attractive thing that you're offering up into the market. So treat it as such. Don't give away the golden goose. Recognize that people will be, even if you're a 3-person company, if you're talking about a board seat, okay, if you're going after people that are sitting on the board at Apple or Google, no, they're not going to take your call. No, they're not going to be interested in your board seat. But if you're talking to ridiculously talented people who don't hold any board seats currently, even if they're real bigwigs out in the marketplace, and you really want to have a conversation, come to them about a board seat. That is probably your best bet for getting on the phone or in a Zoom call with them.
That's helpful. Thank you. As I said, we'll talk more about boards maybe in the Q&A, the private Q&A. But I'm glad we covered that. Alan, how do people reach you and find out about Westwood and Wilshire?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they can ping you and you'll give them all my information here, Paul, or they can go to www.westwood.wilshire. West like the direction, wood like a tree, and then Wilshire is WILSHIRE.com. Michael Kane is our managing director of our life sciences practice, but you can certainly reach me at alan@westwoodwilshire.com. Also happy to talk to anybody on this site or anybody listening in, even on a very informal basis. I love working with startups and love helping and supporting any way that I can. So don't be afraid, reach out.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all. So this first hour was terrific. We got 30 minutes more to go in our private session, but thank you guys very much. Really appreciate all the insight. There's way more to talk about, so I'll look forward to our next conversation on this topic. But in the interim, I want to thank everyone who's tuned in on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in the MedTech Innovator webinar series, we've had topics on pretty much everything you can think about related to being an early stage company in the device diagnostics digital space. So if you go to medtechinnovator.org/live, you can find all of the archive videos, and I encourage you to do that. We also have a schedule of the upcoming discussions as well. So please go there, please tune in the future. We really appreciate you having you here. And of course, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. That'll give you notifications when our videos are being posted. So please go ahead and do that as well. We're going to go ahead and end the live broadcast. Before I do that, the last thing I want to mention is that MedTech Innovator has its showcase and finals coming up at the MedTech Conference. You can go to themedtechconference.com to learn more about the MedTech Conference. It's an annual event put on by AdvaMed of the leadership in the MedTech industry, and from companies from small to large participate. Among many other things, MedTech Innovator will be showcasing all of our companies that are in the program at that conference. We'll also have our large finals competition where the first place this year wins $350,000. We're also going to give away another $150,000 along with that to other companies. So definitely something you want to tune in for. And there'll be more information about that on our website at medtechinnovator.org or themedtechconference.com. Thanks again, panelists, for being here today. Don't go away. We're going to keep going in Q&A. But it's been great having you guys.